But then there's other guys that are making 50 or 60 bucks on an oil change, meaning price-wise, and they may be retaining 10 or $12 an oil change, but the average in North America is 3 bucks. So here's what that sets up. What is the door rate, meaning the labor rate, here in the greater Edmonton, Alberta area?
We're 130.
130 on the door, right? Labor rate. If we look at effective labor rate as it relates to that, right? We've got, what's your effective labor rate?
109 as of yesterday.
109. That's phenomenal, by the way. Okay, congratulations on that.
Yeah.
That's a great effective labor rate. Now, here's the problem. You've got a bay that says it's going to make $130 an hour over the door, and you now start stuffing oil changes through that shop because customers are waiting. What happens to the effective labor rate?
Drops to 89.
It tanks. Now, here's the real problem. How many quality, and I mean quality meaning checking the car over, doing a proper 27-point inspection, lubing the lube points, doing a proper job on the oil change, and you're not a quick lube, how many quality oil changes can your bay deliver in 1 hour? Would you agree it's 2? Quality. You could rush and get 3, maybe 4 out if you're really humming, but boy, you're missing everything if that's the case. So if you take 2 quality oil changes an hour out of a stall that is supposed to do 130, and we're really making 3 bucks an oil change, guess what that stall made the first 2 hours of the day? Made 12 bucks, 6 bucks an hour. This is the importance of getting rid of that. Here's what I believe. If a vehicle has more than 22 to 25,000 kilometers on the odometer, it needs something. Would you guys agree with that? Yeah. Something. Whether it's wiper blades, a bulb, an air filter, in a dusty area, the car needs something, right? So it's imperative that we work and have a process to capture this work, because unless we do that, we'll never move that number, and that number will keep coming down. I mean, why is it that an oil change drags the effective labor rate down? What's the reason?
Because it's a menu price item that you have to discount to stay competitive.
Yes.
So you can't match what your $130 an hour should be. You're paying your tech X amount, but you have to lower the price to stay competitive. It just doesn't work.
There's no question. For example, it would be very difficult to look that customer in the eye and say, I'm sorry, sir, I got to charge you 130 bucks an hour for your oil change, right? You'd be out of business in 2 days, right? And the other things that you can't charge that money for are bulbs, wiper blades, tire rotations, you know, quick, short service. We do have to be competitive with the people around. But here's the question I have. In the parts departments, we have our parts set and matrixed and priced at a certain price, right? So if we have to be a service manager looking around the Edmonton, Alberta area at a competitive maintenance study, and we find that we're, you know, 8 bucks above everybody else on the street for an oil change, and we decide as a management team to become more competitive price-wise, the parts are what the parts are, aren't they, cost-wise?
Well, cost-wise, yes, but you have to have your parts department get on board with your
Yes.
service department to get on board that if you're taking a loss on your effective labor rate, they have to take a loss.
Yes.
So they can sell it at.
Yes, and that's exactly right. And dealers that are smart, the managers in both departments will acknowledge that, and they'll go ahead and do that. But a lot of this industry doesn't do that. The service managers fight with the parts managers. They don't get along. And the next thing you know, in order for that service manager to make his quick service competitive, where does he pull the money out? Labor. So that hurts the technician, and it hurts the service department's profit, right? So these are very important things to look at as we look at how a service department's constructed and how we're shoveling work into that dealership every day. Wouldn't you agree with that? Extremely. And it's most important for the technicians in this room, because it comes down to flat rate hours, right? If we're generating a ton of oil changes and not upselling, certainly our flat rate hours are down, and our technicians are raising skinny kids. That was humor, guys. You guys need a beating with a comedy stick. Here's the net result, right? We want to be able to increase the total hours per repair order on those tickets, right? And that's what this is all about. This is the result, increasing flat rate hours. If you start to work on increasing your hours per repair order and your effective labor rate at the same time, it becomes an incredible multiplier for the shop, doesn't it? Absolutely incredible. And the interesting thing about that is when you start to study the numbers in the service department, it's real money that the dealer can take to the bank to help with raises and new equipment and the kind of things that we need to do in this business to keep things moving forward. So that's kind of what we want to key in on. Now, just to set the stage, you know, I've got an article here that I'm going to read to you in a little while about Canadians holding on to their money and not spending them in service departments so much right now. But dealerships and repair shops all over North America are either closing down or reorganizing based on regional economic problems or manufacturer orchestrated closures. How many of you guys remember what happened with GM and Chrysler a year and a half ago? Right? Obama Motors took over GM, shut down over 1,700 dealers in less than 2 years. Chrysler lost 1,142 dealers in less than 2 years. You guys are very fortunate that you are healthy stores and you didn't fall prey to that. In my country, it went a little bit further than that, but we won't discuss that. But we had a lot of stuff that was crashing around this industry. Would you guys agree over the last 5 years the industry's kind of changing in the face of it, meaning the mix of dealers and independents is changing? We've got businesses reorganizing and or closing, they're merging. Well, in my area where I live in Key Largo, Florida, just north of us is Miami. Miami-Dade County is a humongous metroplex, 3.6 million people in a very small area. We lost 16 new car dealerships in the beginning of 2009, just in that one county, 16. And we've got huge stores, kind of like you have here, maybe even a little bit bigger. One of my best customers runs 310 cars a day through his service drive. Now, think about what would happen if you suddenly lost 16 dealerships in the Edmonton area. There might not be any dealerships left, right? But to speak to Chrysler, in Miami, we had 7 Chrysler points in Miami-Dade County, and when the Chrysler reorganization, the bankruptcy and the reorganization happened, we now have 2, and one of them is getting ready to go out of business. So they're going to end up with either 1 or 2 Chrysler points to serve 3.6 million people. That's how this business is reorganizing. Now, here's something that was very interesting. We read a study in Automotive News that said customer loyalty and retention, the retention of that customer in our store, is becoming the new focus for businesses staying in the long haul. Would you guys agree with that statement? Yeah. You bet, and that's what guys like Doug and Brian and the management at AutoCanada are trying to do, is build retention programs, market the maintenance, and get these guys to come back in the door much more aggressively, because if you don't, your competition is definitely going after this business, isn't it? Especially in the aftermarket, and you'll see that in a few minutes. Competition is increasing for dealers and independents. What do I mean by that? You're saying, Gary, how can competition be increasing if you're telling me the number of stores is going down? Well, here's how that works. If the average dealer has about 5,000 people in their database, right, what would happen if we suddenly shut down 5 stores? That means
5,000 customers up for grabs.
That's exactly right. Does that mean the competition's increasing? You bet, because you're competing with the next Chrysler store in another town that's not part of AutoCanada for that customer. And the other thing that's important for a dealer group to understand is not 100% of those customers are going to go find another Chrysler dealer, are they? Because you're going to have a number of those customers that are out of warranty, right? So a lot of those customers are just going to automatically bleed off into the aftermarket. So we have to be able to sharpen up our skills and do what Doug and Brian and the group is doing to retain those customers. Otherwise, we have a real good chance in today's market of losing them, especially with the economy. So here's the quick stats, and then I'll blow through to the next slide. GM lost 929 in 2008, another 800 at the end of 2009. Ford shut down over 585 dealers by the end of 2009. Now, here's an interesting story about Ford. They did not take the buyout like Chrysler and GM did, thankfully. However, they offered a buyout program to any dealer that wanted to get out because they felt that they had too many Ford stores on every corner in every town. So they put this buyout letter to the Ford dealerships. They expected 185 dealers to cash in their chips. That's what their statistics told them. They got 585 to cash in their chips. It was overwhelming for Ford because they had all these requests to shut down dealerships. Hey, if you're doing a buyout and you'll buy my franchise, I'm out. Because the business is indeed getting tougher. I mean, you guys, there's a bunch of managers in the room, right? What's happened to your warranty revenue over the last 4 years? It's falling sharply. If you talk to dealer principals that own dealerships, they'll say, my goodness, I've never seen a drop in revenue and warranty like we've had now. But why is that? Yeah.
Well, there's greater restrictions on everything.
Sure there is. But they're also building a better car, aren't they? If you look at the cars they were building in the 1980s, I worked for GM in the 1980s. They were building a real crap box back in the early 80s, real bad. So was Chrysler. I mean, the K cars were just really good, weren't they? Right? And today, we've got cars that can go 5, 6, 700,000 kilometers if they're properly maintained and not fall apart, if they're properly maintained. On the other hand, you could get cars that aren't properly maintained that fall apart before 100K. And we see those in our service departments all the time, right? Chrysler had eliminated 1,142 dealerships as of December 09. Now, here's a startling statistic. In North America in 1979, and this figure came from John McElhaney, who was the chairman of NADA, National Auto Dealers Association in the US last year. He spoke at our BG convention, our yearly convention, and he gave me a statistic that basically blew me right out of my chair. He said in 1979 there were 31,000 new car dealers open and doing business in North America. Take a guess what that figure is in 2010. It's less than 17,000. And then he said something that shocked me even more. He said the industry predicts that by 2015, there'll be less than 8,000 new car dealers, which means that between now and 5 years from now, roughly 4 to 5 years from now, it's going to realign again by half. That's an amazing, startling statistic. And that's not doom and gloom. I'm simply sharing a prediction coming out of National Auto Dealers Association. And if anyone had the credibility to issue a statistic like that, it's them, because they're the ones that collect all the data on dealerships, right? So even if we ended up with 11 or 12,000 dealerships at 2015, that's a startling restructure of our business, isn't it? So let me ask this question. How many of the people in this room are comfortable in their jobs? Put your hand up. Okay, I'm going to say this lovingly. Don't be comfortable in your job when the business is realigning like this. Because, for example, in my area, right, one of my best customers, Williamson Cadillac, the service director there told me he had 440 applications for jobs when all those dealerships shut down. So I would say, now that's just one dealership in one city, right? 400 technicians, writers, parts managers, service managers out on the street looking for a job. Don't be comfortable, guys. And I'm not saying that because anybody has to be scared for their job. I'm saying you guys have to physically figure out how to get better at what you do so that if that kind of a slide comes into your service manager's office, you're not the one he's looking at. What does that mean? That means studying and getting a little better at what you do, doesn't it? And having that heart of service for the customer and making the service department perform. It's very important.